thought I'd share some thoughts around the design considerations and functionality of using rainwater to do irrigation and operate in gardens, etc. And for what it's worth, Edible Acres as a nursery, and then here at Edible Acres 2, we have my entire nursery business and all of our food production, even our chickens, everything we've grown for the last 9 years has been dependent exclusively on collected rainwater. We haven't touched groundwater for any of it. It feels like a really nice thing to be proud of. And so now that we're in the 9th year of it, I wanted to share some notes on how we interact with it and creating some additional layers of functionality. And I thought I would take this video as this container is just about ready to do what it was designed to do, which is to crest and overflow into the high tunnel. You'll say, well, wait a minute, where the heck is all that water coming from? You can see we've got our watering cans here. So with rainwater, the rate of flow is super slow. So I've learned over time to have large containers staged strategically throughout the garden that we can run hoses to, that the hoses go back along the soil. Pardon the yard. I don't tend to clean up when I do these videos, so what are you going to do? And I'll take a closer look at it, but that is our main 275-gallon IBC tote that collects rainwater off the southern half of this home in a really low-tech way, which we'll look at. And the valve is open and that water is slowly running uphill, and so it's filling this container. And the design is such that as this container fills, once it starts to overflow, so if I forget to close the valve, by default it'll overflow into a cut that was made that sends all of the overflow water into the walkway of this greenhouse, which will then soak into the sawdust and be wicked into the garden beds. So by leaving the valve open for a few hours, it fills this battery, so to speak, of water, which is very easy for us to just dip into with cheapy water cans, some of which sometimes I cut the stems off to make it easier to pour. And that allows us to do watering for new areas, for example, putting down claytonia in the fall, or putting down carrots or beets, what have you, where they need watering until they get established. But as these containers overflow, and you can see here it is overflowing, just beginning. I'll come back to this in a minute or two. I'm going to let this overflow for a bit, but the water trickles down, and instead of being wasted into the yard, it goes into the greenhouse. So I'll come back to that in a little bit and show what that looks like. But let's look at the actual totes themselves, and you can see how incredibly low complexity the system really is. Incredibly inelegant. Well, maybe elegant, I don't know, but it's dirty. And I don't really care, because it's rainwater, and it's off on the side, and it's really functioning for us. I feel like there's a ton of videos out there where people have these brand new installed rainwater systems that look really crystal clean, very unused, and expensive. And this is not any of those things, so I'm happy to show this and feel embarrassed or whatever. But you can see very low-tech way to get it off the ground is cinder blocks. Ideally you would get the area nice and level. I got it level-ish. When in doubt, make it so that the tote is, if it's going to collapse, it collapses away from your structure, so lean it slightly away. And in our case, the gutter, originally, like how it is with almost all homes, the gutter was set up in this ridiculous way where it originally would just come down, you can see where the old tube was, and dump right here. Wonderful. All the rainwater can go right back into the garage. So in this case, I just put an adapter, $4 or $5 plastic adapter that I screwed onto the downspout that adapts to the 2x4 standard downspout to 4-inch diameter ductwork or drainage tube. And this is just a couple screws into the siding with old fencing wire twist tied to hold this up, and it's at enough of a pitch that the water comes down. An old burlap sack keeps it at the right pitch to dump through a mesh This is unnecessary. Half-inch hardware cloth, which is fine enough to capture the largest leaves and easy for me to dump out. And once a season I empty the whole thing and wash it out if I feel I need to. That's it, really low tech. These can be purchased on Craigslist or found locally for around $100 a piece. The fittings on the bottom, I probably will do another video at some point that goes into more detail, but it's a 2-inch threaded diameter, or a male threaded fitting on these bungs. So I have 2-inch threaded PVC that goes to a shaft that is a 2-inch PVC to 3/4 inch MPT threading, which gets me to standard garden hose. And in our case, this one turns on or off. That's the hose that was delivering over to that galvanized tub that was overflowing and feeding the greenhouse. And this one remains on, and this hose goes down around. Now the reason I like to get to 3/4 inch threaded MPT is those hoses come for free all the time. People are throwing them out, so I just go with that as a standard. And that feeds into this tote. So basically the water comes in to that one and equalizes with this one. So we have 600 gallons, well, a little shy of 600 gallons storage. And this one, there's a hose that I got for $2 from a yard sale that runs down and over past one of the compost bins, all the way down past the truck, past the woodshed, and down to the far end of the property where we can water those gardens down there. So it can service the entire gardening setup passively through gravity. And this is just a series of 55-gallon drums connected in series, which I could go into more detail if people wanted to see, which have an overflow that comes down, scoops around, and dumps out near the compost bin, so it can pick up leachate and feed it into a swale that goes down past a whole bunch of production beds in there. Let's look at that tub again. Well, I'd really have to let it run for quite a while for it to be significant, but I guess the idea is that it's inevitable that at some point I'll forget to close the valve here or there. And so to design in redundancies that when you forget to do the thing you meant to do, it doesn't waste things. It dumps into a swale or it dumps into a garden bed. It's kind of a permaculturally idea, I think. And so again, it's dumping down when it overflows, and it goes into here and wick waters into those beds. And we like to keep this topped off. There's just more water holding capacity. You can see there's in the garden a larger tub, which is our hot tub in the fall and winter, and our irrigation tub in the summer. I did a video about that using a solar panel and a bilge pump to lift water from a hand-dug well I made in the garden, which basically acts as a spring in the ground. But I can also feed this with rainwater. So it's very low-tech stuff, pretty resilient. It's nice to practice gardening and farming without any grid dependence, just in case you ever need to know how to do that. And I guess in that theme, this sure seems like a end times image. I found that in the woods. Someone started to cut the antlers off, and then they quit almost all the way through. Anyway, take one last look at the rain tote and wrap it up. One last detail that I realized I wanted to mention that took me a while to learn, but I realized has to be part of every rainwater catchment system that you make, is to provision for an overflow state. Right now the water line is right here. All it would take is a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch of rain, and this would absolutely be full, in which case it would just be dumping water onto the ground around it. And so what this is drilled a hole, put in a threading for garden hose, have this little section going up as a breather, like a snorkel, so that the air can be released and it can equalize, and that overflow water comes out and around. This is heading northbound, and it opens into a sunlight area right here and basically pours into wood chip pathways, which all have wine cap inoculated through here. So it has like a useful destination that's downslope and going away from the home. Pretty important to make sure that they are going to overflow. Where does that overflow water go? So it's not a nuisance, but rather a benefit. So very superficial first pass of looking at these systems. If there's interest, I can go deeper into how these are put together. But really it's more than anything a video to empower folks to say, oh, right, it's pretty straightforward. Just get a couple totes and figure out how to jam them into some position and start using them. You can always empty them out and move them and adjust if you needed to. But that's our low-tech system that we've been dependent on for 9 years, and it's worked for us entirely without any well water. So I think you can definitely do this too. Thanks for watching.